Hi, I'm Archie with Strike Zone Fishing, and today I'm going to show you how to make a ballyhoo leader and also how to rig up ballyhoo, and then of course transport it for your trip. You're going to need a few items. First we'll start with the rig itself. We're going to use 60-pound Momoy Presentation fluorocarbon. It's a fantastic line, knots well, and very strong. Next you'll need some number 12 wire. This is going to be for the pin that we're going to set up on the hook end. Then you'll need a small crimp. This is a .08 double sleeve crimp that will hook up the lead loop. Next you'll need a larger crimp. This is a 1.3 Bill Fisher double sleeve crimp. This will hold the hook and the pin that we're going to put in. My favorite hook for rigging a medium ballyhoo is going to be this 11-0 owner long shank hook. Very strong and very sharp. Perfect for the hook placement, puts it further back in case you get any short strikes. For the chin weight, we're going to use a 3/8 ounce. 3/8 is a little big, but it'll definitely keep any size ballyhoo right side up whenever you're pulling it through. Obviously the small or the dink ballyhoos, you'll use an 1/8 ounce. Smalls, small mediums, you'll use 1/4 ounce, and of course up to a 3/8 for your bigger ballyhoo. To tie the ballyhoo down, we're going to use this 12-inch heavy-duty copper rigging wire. It's a great wire. The heavy-duty is a little thicker and stiffer, so it holds the ballyhoo down a lot better. There's going to be several tools we're going to use for this exercise. First, we'll start with a good pair of kitchen shears or braid snips, which we all have. A round shaft, like a wood dowel or an arrow shaft. This is for poking out the eyeball. Flush cuts. These are for cutting down the tag ends on your leader, whether it be on the loop or close to the hook. That way we don't have any tags sticking out. These are cable cutters. And this is for cutting the number 12 hard wire for creating the pin rig. Just a Phillips head screwdriver, something with some size to it, so I can show you how to tie the loop end in case you don't want to crimp it. Or if you're in a pinch where you don't have a crimp or crimpers on hand, you can simply tie it. And of course our crimper. This will crimp down all the crimps that we have and help bend the number 12 wire back for the pin. For storing the bait, we recommend bionic brine. It's a great salt for preserving the bait and toughening up the skin after you rig it and into the trip that you take it on. We use these Max bait trays, and to keep it tough, we're going to use this bionic bait salt. Now it's time to rig the ballyhoo. First, we're going to thaw the ballyhoo out. To properly thaw the ballyhoo, I put the ballyhoo pack in a bucket of ice water. Let it sit for a few minutes and it should get them nice and thawed out, so we can go ahead and work the bait. Let's start by making the ballyhoo leader. Start by cutting the leader at an angle with your flush cuts. This will help insert the 60-pound fluorocarbon into the .08 double sleeve crimp. Pass it through. Pass it through again and draw that loop down right to about a 1/4 inch. Again, you're just going to insert a snap swivel on the end of your fishing line. Take a crimper, make sure you stand it up, then mash down on it. Another way you can put a loop on the end of your line is tying it. That's one of my favorite ways. I find it to be a little stronger so, get your end. We're going to do a perfection loop. What you do is you make a loop, go around the loop, split the loop. Put the second loop into the first loop. Then you take your round screwdriver, put it through, and then bear down pressure. And of course, cut close. That's a great method in case you don't have a crimp on hand, your crimpers are on hand, or maybe a leader just broke off and you want to make a quick loop. That's a great, strong connection. On the opposite end of the 6-foot leader, we're going to attach the hook. First, you'll take your larger crimp, pass it through, then your hook. You're going to go through the front side of the hook, which is the side with the point. Then go back through it. We're going to take the number 12 wire. I like to put the wire through the back end of the crimp. That way I know it's going all the way through with a little bit of tag sticking in, and it doesn't push the leader out. Stand to crimp up in the crimper, and crimp one end, crimp on the other. Push that 12 wire back. And with the cable cutters, cut up about 3/4 inch away from the crimp. Then the copper wire, we're going to tie onto the hook. Go through the back of the hook, about 1/4 inch, fold the tag in, wrap around again. This time, put the tag through the eye of the hook and underneath that loop that you just made. And that's how you attach that. So now we have a complete ballyhoo rig. This is perfect for if you're planning on running a skirt with it, but if you're running it naked with just the chin weight, the only difference would be adding the sinker on the bottom end of the loop. The only difference to rig up a chin weighted ballyhoo is just adding a sinker. First, we're going to pass the leader through the double sleeve crimp, then the chin weight. The chin weight can vary between 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce, even a 3/8 ounce. It just depends on the size of the ballyhoo. Obviously, the smaller the ballyhoo, the smaller the weight. The larger the ballyhoo, the bigger the weight. So now that we have our crimp, sinker, now we just place it through the front of the hook, and then the leader back through the crimp. Draw that close. And then the number 12 wire for the pin. Here I'm just inserting it into the back side of the crimp, pushing it out. Then we'll crimp all that together. Bend that number 12 back. And we'll trim that close. Whatever remaining tag of the leader, just trim that down. So how we have that so far. Next, we're going to attach the copper wire to the hook. Again, we'll go through the back of the hook, about 1/4 inch, fold it back, wrap it around, wrap it again, around again. Put the tag through the back of the eye and underneath that loop that you just made. Cinch down, watch out for that point. There you go. Now that we have the ballyhoo thawed out, now let's prep them. We'll pull it out of the ice water, cut the pack open. So when they come out of the bag, they're half frozen, they're stiff. We've got to put some life to them. The best way we can do it is properly prepare them, and I'll show you how. First, break off the beak. Then, take a kitchen shears or braid snips, cut the pectoral fins off. Many times you'll find pectoral fins frozen forward. That will cause the bait to spin. So cut them off. Once you have the pectoral fins cut off, then break the back. The best way to do it is just to kind of move the bait as if it's swimming. Then we need to separate the meat from the backbone. Do this by squeezing on the upper body until you see the back pop up just a little bit. Too hard, you'll crush the bait. Then we're gonna have to squeeze the poop out. Hold the backside, come up to the gills, pinch them down, just kind of roll down to the back end of it. Almost there. Then we're going to poke the eyeball out. This will help rigging the ballyhoo a lot easier. Take your wood dowel or an arrow shaft, poke it out. You can go the extra step by scaling them, and that's putting your thumb in and just pushing up on here. The scales do inhibit the action of the bait, but it also cuts down on the lifespan on how long you can troll them. You can only troll them for a short time, but you do get a little bit more action. But that's what we're looking for right here. It's completely optional. If you scale it, it just reduces the pull time, how much time you can pull the bait through the water. But it does add a lot more action to the bait. Take your thumb, go up the side, press down, scale it. Not too hard, otherwise you'll tear into the skin. Okay. Once you have your ballyhoo prepped, you'll notice that some aren't exactly the same size. So a lot of times I like to separate it because I'll have some rigs made with a certain size hook, some rigs made with maybe a little larger hook. So it's good to separate your ballyhoo, that way you put the hook to the appropriate size. Even just going through these 4, we have 2 distinct sizes. So here I'll use my larger 11-0 hook. This here, you can reserve that for your smaller hooks, like your 9-0, or maybe use them as a pitch bait. But we don't want to put a large hook in a smaller ballyhoo. So now we'll take the larger sizes and we'll rig those up. The best way to get a plan of attack as far as what rig will work with which ballyhoo is to just simply lay the rig over the ballyhoo you're going to rig. The pin that we made here, that's going to insert through the lower jaw, through the upper jaw, between the upper snout and the beginning of the eyeball. And you see where that falls. Now, where that falls, also take note where the hook is going to intersect through the belly. That's important because we don't want these baits to spin. That's the #1 culprit that causes baits to spin. So with that in mind, we're going to feed this hook by lifting the gill plate, feeding it through the belly to where we come out of this intersect that we marked. And you can mark it by placing your finger right there and taking the hook and making a small incision. Again, start by lifting the gill plate, feed the hook, make sure you curl the bait along with the curl of the hook, and then you see that incision that we made. You're going to come up right where it is. Then push the hook downward. Push the pin through the lower jaw, through the upper jaw. Try to come out as straight as you can, as centered as you can through the skull. You can kind of hide the chin weight right underneath the chin. Just tuck it underneath the gill plate. Next, you'll take the copper wire and we're going to lash the ballyhoo down with it. With the hook eye just behind the gill plate, you'll go over the skull, back behind the other gill plate, underneath the chin, through the eyeball socket, underneath, wrap forward of that pin, underneath and wrap behind the pin, and then you'll spiral forward and then back around. And then you can tuck the tag end inside the socket. You can use your dowel that you used to kind of help push it downward. And there you have it. The best way to know if your bait's going to spin after you've done all that prep and rigging is to pull on the tail and then on the lead. Just make a light tug. And if you see the hook shank curling the bait, it will spin. But as you see, it moves without curling the bait. So one of the common mistakes in rigging a ballyhoo is, well, improper hook placement as far as where you come out of the belly. A lot of times you can make this mistake by pulling some of the smaller baits, or maybe you just ran the hook too far back, and of course undoing it would just tear up the bait. Now, one way to show if it's going to spin, again, what I've mentioned is if you pull on the tail and then the lead, you'll see that curl. Very distinct. Obviously that will spin. Now you can still salvage it. Take your braid snips or kitchen shears and cut ahead. Just enough to where there is no curl. And there you go. Even with a simple mistake of putting the hook too far back, you can fix it by cutting up, allowing that hook to ride freely. Again, pull on the tail, pull on the lead. If the hook's not tugging on the belly, it'll swim just fine. A lot of times you can go back over it and drip a little bit of brine right there in the belly just to toughen up that area. If you want to go an extra step, put a stitch. But other than that, will pull just fine. Just watch the baits. On an offshore day, when I know we're going to pull some ballyhoo, I'll have several dozen of these rigged up, exactly like this. Chin weight, long shank hook, naked ballyhoo, leader. Now a lot of times I want to skirt it to add some color, maybe I want it to splash, or maybe I want it to protect the bait as it's pulled through the spread. And that's what a skirt does. So I'll have several of these. If I want to skirt it, I'll simply do this. Take the lead end, pass it through a piece of Monel with a little loop. A lot of my lures have this larger hole drilled through it, or some lures come with it, or some lures are rubber based, so it'll stretch over this whole contraption. Go through the back side of the lure. Pull it through, dress it. So now we've added some color in less than 2 seconds. A head that will splash through the spread that is very effective for mahi. Bullet heads tend to attract more tuna if you pull it further back. Larger bullet heads are great for wahoo. And of course the larger cup faces, a lot of billfish like that too. But this definitely adds some color to your ballyhoo. Also, certain heads make them swim a little different. This particular one likes to splash with this cup face, and definitely adds some action to your spread. Once you have your ballyhoo rigged up, then you're going to store it for the trip to come. Take the bait, we'll just coil the leader. Two passes should do, that way there's no tangles whenever you're wanting to deploy the bait. Take your bait tray, salt the bottom, just needs a nice layer. Then you'll place the ballyhoo on top. Once you get a row of ballyhoo rigged up, then you'll salt that top layer. Place another layer of ballyhoo. Then you should have a row of ballyhoo here, and a row of ballyhoo here. Place a tray in a cooler over some ice, but not soaked in that ice water. It has to be elevated and dry, but cool. That should last for a few hours over a course of a trip. Salting the bait down will also firm up the skin and allow you to pull it for a good amount of time until, of course, hopefully something hits it.